You will be shocked, but even in our times, murders happen right in the courtroom. Today, I'll tell you about the most astonishing and horrifying incidents that have occurred during court sessions in different countries. You'll learn about the most significant and high-profile cases. And at the end of the video, I'll discuss a mass killing of witnesses by an entire gang of criminals.
Enjoy the show.
It seems that a courtroom murder in our time is only possible in Hollywood movies. But you, like me, will be shocked when you find out what happened just recently, in 2018, in Guatemala. Yes, that's right, very recently. And I am still surprised that such a thing can even happen in a time when metal detectors are everywhere and law enforcement agencies are daily catching criminals. All right, let's get to the point. Prosecutor Carlos Pacheco was actively working on a case against Jose Manuel Martinez, who was the head of one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in Guatemala. The case was complicated and dangerous, as Martinez had significant influence and connections in the criminal world. But who is this criminal, and what kind of organization did he have? Martinez is an extremely well-known criminal. He is accused of numerous murders and drug trafficking. This person apparently had connections everywhere. On the day of the tragedy, Martinez was brought to court for a hearing related to his criminal activities. The process attracted public attention since it was about one of the country's most notorious criminal leaders. And then something terrible happened. Right during the session, Martinez suddenly pulled out a hidden weapon and opened fire on Prosecutor Carlos Pacheco. The attack happened so swiftly that it caused panic in the courtroom. Prosecutor Pacheco was fatally wounded and died on the spot. Of course, the killer did not get away with it. He was immediately detained and sent behind bars by security. But what amazes me personally is that this guy somehow managed to smuggle a weapon into the court.
How is that even possible in the 21st century?
I am very surprised that only after such a high-profile case did the government consider revising security measures in judicial institutions. Why didn't the police think beforehand that one of the criminals, especially a highly dangerous one, might try to bring a weapon to a session? In general, there are only mysteries. So, what happened to Martinez? After the prosecutor's murder, he was charged with several serious crimes. His case was handled under heightened security conditions. Eventually, Martinez was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Oh yes, I forgot to mention the public's reaction. Colleagues and friends of the prosecutor called him a true hero who gave his life in the fight for justice. This whole incident received massive coverage across Guatemala. But personally, I think this outcome could have been avoided by simply strengthening security in the courtroom. However, no one can guarantee that the prosecutor could have lived a peaceful life. After all, Martinez was the leader of a criminal organization, and his henchmen would certainly have avenged their boss. The next case I want to tell you about happened in 2012 in Charleston, USA. And, as it seems to me, this is a much more indicative incident, which once again proves that security and screening in courtrooms need to be significantly strengthened. So, what happened there? In general, the story is as follows. Nothing foreshadowed trouble, as it was an ordinary civil case. Michael Kennedy and his wife were in the process of a divorce, accompanied by serious disagreements about property division and child custody. And overall, this is quite a standard situation. Kennedy was extremely dissatisfied with the course of the process and the decision, which he believed was unfair. And, okay, he could have filed an appeal. But no, he decided to act much more decisively. Michael Kennedy came to the court session, having previously hidden a weapon. During the hearing, when key issues of the case were being discussed, he suddenly pulled out a gun and opened fire on his wife's lawyer, Jonathan Lucarelli. He also began shooting at others present in the courtroom, including his wife, but fortunately, the rest of the people did not receive fatal injuries. However, lawyer Lucarelli died on the spot. I think it was all about luck. If Michael Kennedy had been a better shooter, a lot more people would have been injured during the crime, and since the lawyer was the first target, he received the most serious injury. Naturally, law enforcement agencies quickly responded to the shooting in the courtroom. The security neutralized Kennedy, and then they began providing assistance to all the injured. And there were quite a few, as panic ensued in the courtroom, and there were those who simply fell and got bruises. In general, the story is extremely unpleasant. After that, the court was closed for investigative actions. This incident naturally caused a wide public outcry, and perhaps it is precisely because of this case that today you hardly hear about similar incidents in American courts, as significant security measures were taken after the lawyer's murder. What exactly did they do? Well, now everyone entering the building undergoes thorough checks, and security has been strengthened. But what happened to Michael Kennedy? He was detained and then charged with murder and attempted murder. His second trial was held under heightened security, although it seems to me that the second time this guy would not have committed such an act. Ultimately, Michael was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. And if the previous cases might not have caused you some disgust or negativity, the next character personally evokes a feeling of hatred in me. Because the person responsible for it turned out to be such a scumbag that it's even hard to comment on. In general, this case happened in 2009 in Tokyo. Japan is famous for the large number of perverts who harass girls and secretly photograph them. But Takashi Kawamoto turned out to be a real maniac and rapist. He was arrested for sexual crimes against several women, and he was so well known that the case received widespread public attention, as all his victims testified against him in court. Unfortunately, Kawamoto's crimes did not end there. During a hearing, one of the victims was giving her testimony against him. At that moment, Kawamoto suddenly pulled out a hidden knife and attacked the witness, stabbing her several times. The attack happened so quickly and unexpectedly that those present in the courtroom did not have time to react immediately. The wounds the girl received were fatal.
Unfortunately, she died before the ambulance arrived.
And what do you think was happening in the courtroom at that moment? Naturally, there was panic. I personally do not understand how police officers can hold their positions if they cannot protect a witness from an attack, especially since Takashi had an ordinary knife, not a firearm. And again, it's all about the panic. But still, the defendant was detained before he could harm anyone else. This incident caused a wide public outcry, even before the terrible thing happened. What can we say about the consequences? Ultimately, all this led to a serious review of security measures in Japanese courts. Stricter rules of inspection and control over defendants were introduced, and measures to ensure the safety of witnesses and victims testifying in court were strengthened. But what happened to this scumbag? Personally, I would like such criminals to be sent to execution. Not only did he break the psyche and seriously harm his victims, but he also killed one in front of a huge number of people. And fortunately, there is no moratorium on the death penalty in Japan. After the attack, Kawamoto was charged with premeditated murder and other serious crimes. His case was handled under heightened security conditions. Eventually, he was found guilty and sentenced to death for his actions. But if in all the cases I told you about earlier, the criminals couldn't escape the consequences, in the next story, the killer almost succeeded. And this shocks me to the core. But to be fair, this happened in the last century when technology wasn't as advanced. In 1999, in Milwaukee, USA, a trial was being held for Theodore Oswald. This man was arrested and charged with armed robbery and other crimes. The case also attracted significant public attention. You'd think with such widespread attention, security would be tight. But no. Theodore was very unhappy about being on trial, and he had an unstable psychological state. And in my opinion, this seriously influenced what happened. During the incident, Oswald was in the courthouse for another hearing. When Judge Frederick Gartner was delivering the verdict, Theodore suddenly pulled out a hidden weapon. He opened fire on the judge and other court staff. Unfortunately, Frederick was fatally wounded and died on the spot. In addition to him, 2 other people were killed. Oswald then attempted to escape. And I must say,
He managed to get away, though not for long.
Now I'd like to try to understand how a dangerous and armed criminal managed to escape, even if only briefly. The shooting caused utter chaos in the courthouse. People were running in all directions, panicking to save themselves. Moreover, the police officers were also driven by the instinct of self-preservation, and did not immediately act. Because of this, the criminal managed to hide for a short time. Later, the entire building was evacuated, and the injured received medical help. Theodore himself was detained shortly thereafter, and I am personally amazed that he managed to slip away, even if only briefly. Naturally, this incident caused a huge public outcry, and, as usual, only after the most terrible events did changes occur that should, in the future, prevent something similar. But as we already know, this still wasn't enough. What happened to Theodore? Well, he was detained, and then sent back to the dock. He was charged with multiple serious crimes, and this time, it was simply impossible for him to kill someone or escape. Security was tightened, and Theodore himself was thoroughly searched. In the end, he was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. I've saved the most shocking and interesting story for last. If all the previous cases happened because of the actions of one person, in the next story, several members of one criminal gang were involved, and I am personally amazed that this is even possible. Just imagine, the trial was about the activities of one of the most dangerous gangs in New York, accused of multiple crimes, including murders, racketeering, and drug trafficking. It seemed that all precautions should be taken, but somehow, one of the criminals managed to smuggle in a gun. During the trial, when witnesses were testifying against the gang, this man suddenly pulled out a gun and opened fire on the witnesses. Several people, including the main witness, were fatally wounded. Panic erupted in the courtroom. Unfortunately, the police only neutralized the criminals after everything had already happened. Naturally, the usual protocol followed. Everyone was evacuated, the injured were given help, and the attacker was arrested. But what's most surprising in this story is that it was the shooter who was decided to be judged to the fullest extent of the law. He was charged with premeditated murder and other crimes. The new hearings took place under heightened security conditions. In the end, he was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. But what happened to the other criminals? As for the other gang members, the story remains silent. I think they were also charged. But it's quite possible they received less severe punishments. Just imagine, several witnesses who testified against them were killed. Moreover, the gang members who were free continued their activities and eliminated the remaining witnesses. Most likely, those who were on trial managed to avoid fair justice. Well, I very much hope that's not the case. What do you think?
Share your opinion in the comments.
In the end, as we have understood, the police somehow only start acting after something terrible happens, and this is regardless of the country. I still don't understand what the problem was with just inspecting the criminals for foreign objects, and even more, I don't understand how you can hide a gun. I can understand a knife, as it can be small and easy to smuggle, but definitely not a firearm. In any case, people learn from mistakes. And unfortunately, sometimes this experience is quite bitter. We can only hope that today all court proceedings are conducted in complete safety. Although even now, these conditions do not meet the necessary standards. Many institutions in different countries don't even have metal detectors, let alone inspections. And it seems all this will change only after several more similar incidents. Today I told you about cases of murder right in the courtroom. Share your thoughts on all these incidents in the comments. Well, I'd like to emphasize once again that only professionals should be hired in the police force. And you know where else professionals are needed? In our team. Friends, you have the opportunity to join our team. If you have video editing skills, can voice over videos in Russian, English, and other languages, or write interesting scripts, we'd be happy to work with you. Contact the Telegram bot. The link is in the description. And thank you for your attention.